Morning, my name is Pastor Wayne Robbins. I pastor Christ Church of the Canyon here in beautiful Wrightwood. And it is, I always tell you I don't want to give you a weather report. So I'm not going to give you a weather report today. I will give you a pollen report. Lots of pollen. Everything is covered with yellow pollen. And it doesn't do any good to get rid of it because the season's not done yet. And we're surrounded by all kinds of pine trees and various trees that emit this yellow stuff. And it is literally all over the place. And so it's just one of those things that every place has its issues, and I'll take the pollen over the craziness of Southern California. Actually, we are in Southern California, but not off the hill kind of a thing. So it's all good. I appreciate your prayers over the last couple of weeks. Noel and I were traveling. Went to spend some time with a good close friend of mine, and him and his wife, Charlie Kennedy. He just recently retired from his practice. He's an MD in Lexington, Kentucky. I've never been there. Obviously, it's famous for horses, all kinds of horses. But just had a great time with them, and it was all good, and it's nice to get away on occasion. Then from there, drove down to Noel's parents in Branson, Missouri, actually Kirbyville, just outside of Branson, and spent some time there. There are a couple of other occasions and things going on. One of our nephews was getting married, and so we were involved in that. It was Noel's mom's birthday. That was another reason why we went there. But the biggest issue, the biggest thing that we did, the biggest event was the birth of a horse. And my brother-in-law and sister-in-law are getting in the part-time horse business. They're raising Friesians, if you're familiar with that kind of breed, gorgeous horses. They've been used in wars in the past, I think up to even World War I. But just amazing horses. But we watched, actually, the little guy was born the night after we got there, and so we didn't see that, but we saw the effects of it. And I want to show you a picture of him. This is him and his mom. His name is Atlas. That's not his professional name, but it's Atlas, and next to his mom, her name is Athena. But you can see these are huge horses, and Athena stands about 17 hands if you know anything about horses. So let me show you a picture of them. There you go. If you're just joining us, I don't normally do these kinds of things, but nevertheless, that is Athena, and the little guy's name is Atlas. This picture was taken about 2 weeks after his birth, so you can tell by his long legs he's going to be a big one. His dad stands about 18 hands, and so they're huge horses, but as docile and as loving as possible. But he is a miracle. After he was born, he developed some complications. We didn't know. Brought a vet out. The vet said, "Hey, you better get this guy to the equine center up at the University of Missouri as soon as possible." Come to find out, he had a birth defect, and so his internals, his insides weren't working correctly, and so they fixed him. And he was up there for about 4 days. Him and his mom go up together. You don't separate them. They go up together, and the staff up there just loved on him. And he's fine now. And so they sit him back down, and there he is with his mom. And just a great little guy. Incredibly friendly. You pet him. His mom doesn't mind that. And anyway, so it's kind of fun. So, but I appreciate your prayers. We had a great time. And now we're back in the saddle and trying to get caught up with all the stuff for summer, right? Anyway, so thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. We're going to jump back into the book of Judges. We've got about 3 more parts of the series in Judges, all dealing with Samson. We're going to start into Samson this morning, and so I hope you enjoy it. It's been a fun study for me. Samson is an interesting guy. Growing up in the church, you hear all kinds of crazy stories about him, mainly the issue of his hair and that he was strong, and his girlfriend or his wife Delilah, and she caused issues for him. We're going to go into detail with those over the next couple of weeks, but I want to set it up for you this morning and give you some overview in regards to the type of person he was, the Nazirite vow, and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we want to do this morning. So let me pray with you, and then we'll jump into it. Father, again, thank you for today. Thank you, Father, for your goodness, for your blessings that are always good. I pray, Father, for just the folks who are watching now. I pray, Father, that you would encourage them through this study. And Lord, just kind of jumping ahead, I'm sure that whoever is watching this may know of someone, or they might be in this situation as well. Maybe they've got a loved one who has walked away from the Lord. even though they've been raised in the church, raised in the faith, but yet they still walk away. And I pray for those folks, Lord. I pray you would give them just an extra measure of steadfastness, an extra measure of courage, an extra measure of wisdom. Samson was one of those guys. He just walked away. And I pray, Father, that you would guide us and direct us. Enlighten us, please, in regards to your word and how you interact with us. God, thank you. In your Son's name, amen. Okay. Let me ask you a question, and you can run it around your mind a little bit. Here's the question. Can you sin and continue to follow God? Can you sin and continue to follow God? Well, the answer is yes. But God would rather forgive you than bring judgment upon you. God would rather forgive you than bring judgment upon you. We are sinners, and we're born sinners, and we sin all throughout our lives. Hopefully we sin less as we get older and as we grow closer to the Lord, and in that walk with Him. We've talked about that over the last weeks before, right, with Enoch and Noah and those guys who walked with God. And we talked about that and what that meant. I'm going to spend just a second going back into that for a moment or two. But let me throw out some thank yous. And I don't know if any of you, some of you I know watch this, and Judy, I know you do, and others watch this and then come to church the next day. But just a shout out to guys like Matt Wells, who did the announcements for me the last couple of weeks and led in communion. Not an easy task, and I appreciate him. Mark Updahl, another one of our guys who jumped in and played the piano for us, and appreciate him, and as well Brian Most, who led our men's breakfast for me. So I appreciate those guys. Did a great job, and I got a great church, and folks will jump in and help out when they need to help out. Okay, let's make some review of the book of Judges, because we've been out of it for a few weeks. Understand that the judges, these folks, were not perfect or sinless individuals. They were not. In fact, Noah and Enoch were not perfect individuals, right? We did that study a couple of weeks ago. In fact, Mary, Jesus' earthly mother, was not sinless, despite what our Roman Catholic brethren promote. She sinned. It's just the way it goes. You know, she sinned and she was a sinner. That's a whole different, another study, but nevertheless, we know that she was. Gideon, when we looked at Gideon, was not perfect. He had multiple wives and disregarded God's purpose for the priesthood, had some issues with that. Gideon sinned. He did. We know that. Cain, we talked about Cain a few weeks back, and Cain murdered his brother. I would call that a sin. He could have repented, and God would have forgave him. He could have walked with God. He made a choice not to do that, which is interesting. Cain's an interesting guy for a lot of reasons, and if you didn't get a chance to hear that sermon, you can go back in the archives and listen to it. He had every opportunity to ask God for forgiveness and get back into a relationship with God. He made a choice, Cain made a choice not to do that. And God understood that. When God created us with a free will, the desire to do things that we should not do sometimes, and to break away from God, and to spend time in other pursuits that are ungodly. That's a free will choice. And Cain did that. It doesn't mean that God looks the other way when we sin and says, it's okay, don't worry about it, just ask for forgiveness and get back into the fold. It doesn't work that way. God is, in a sense, if I could use the word distraught, and it's an inappropriate word to use for God, but nevertheless, when we sin, it's not good. And God had a perfect plan for Samson. We're going to get to him in a moment. But Samson didn't want it, which is interesting. He got tapped to be a judge. And for whatever reason, he did some of that, but nevertheless, he was incredibly inconsistent in his walk with the Lord. Samson, like Enoch and Noah, could have walked with God. Samson, in spite of his parents were godly people, raised him like he should have been raised, but in the end, he wanted nothing to do with it. He came back, which is interesting, and as we go through this study over the next couple of weeks, he came back into the fold, basically on his deathbed, which is interesting. And I know that there are people out there that will tell you, well, yeah, I left God, but before I die, I'll come back to him. Well, the problem is you don't know when you're going to die. I don't know when I'm going to die. And if you want a life that is full, that is godly, that God is pleased with, then you start that now. Don't wait until you're almost dead. Okay, so here's where we're going to go. If you have your Bibles, I need you to find Judges 13. Judges chapter 13 is where we're going to be. And we're going to work through the narrative in a few moments. Again, as I continue to set this up with an overview in regards to who Samson was. I don't know what you know about Samson. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you might know a couple of things, about him. Probably something having to do with his hair, his strength, that sort of thing. But we're going to get into the kind of the nitty-gritty of Samson and who he was. But before we do that, I want to read Judges chapter 13, verses 1 and 5. Verses 1 and 5. Now the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, so that the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines 40 years. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now Jesus appears to Samson's parents prior to his birth. Okay, so now bump down to verse 5. For behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head. For the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. May God bless the reading of his holy word. Back to a definition of a judge, they're deliverers. You remember that the people of Israel were constantly drifting away from God and allowing themselves to be subjected to other religions, false gods, in regards to the cultures that were around them, and they bought into that. The Israelites bought into that, and God said, don't do it, stay away from it. They consistently bought into it, and God would send a deliverer or a judge to get them out of that situation. But it was horrible when they were in it. Characteristically, some of those times lasted over 40 years. That's a generation when they were under the occupation, if you will, of a horrible culture, an ungodly culture. Okay, by way of overview, and you can download these notes. They'll have them on the website. You can download them and you can follow along with me. But who was Samson? Who was he? Well, his life is just one big, huge contradiction. It really is. He had great physical strength, but he also had great moral weakness. And he would vacillate between the two and cause all kinds of problems for everybody around him. He was a judge or a deliverer for 20 years. Let me back up for a second. Remember the book of Judges, or the time of the judges, lasts right around 400 years. It's a long time. So he was a judge for about 20 years, or a deliverer for the Israelites for about 20 years. He was a Nazarite, and I'm explaining what that is. He was set aside to God at birth, like John the Baptist was. Then you can go and you can read about that in regards to John the Baptist. But let's talk a little bit about the Nazarite vow and what that means. This discussion is a little bit lengthy, but I think it helps us to understand what was required of him, really from birth. In fact, an angel, you'll see this in a moment, an angel who is actually God incarnate, Jesus Christ, visits him in his, prior to being born, visits his parents. Let me get to the Nazarite vow in a second. Let me come back to the overview again. He continually broke his Nazarite vows. What's the point of taking the vow? But he did. God's Spirit came upon him many times, giving him great strength. And even though your kids will tell you that are in Sunday school, or even folks who've been in Sunday school heard this, that his strength comes through his hair. It doesn't come through his hair. It comes through God. That was just symbolic. All right? And then he gets a cut, remember? Delilah is involved in that, gets a cut, and then he's all weak. Samson was a womanizer and a vengeful man. Although his name is listed in Hebrews 11, which shows us and lists for us, in a sense, a hall of fame of great people who God did amazing things through. So there he is in the hall of fame. But was he an incredible sinner? He did just silly, insane things. Did God still want to bless him? Yeah. Did it give him license? Did it give Samson to go out and do whatever he wanted to do, knowing that God was still going to work in his life? No, that's not the way you do it. That's not the way you do it. And if you think about it, if Samson would have stayed true, at least to his Nazarite vows, God could have used him in phenomenal ways. We will never know that until we get to heaven. But in a sense, God is going to get his will done no matter what. And that's exactly what he did with Samson. Okay, so let's read through the narrative, Judges 13, 1 through 20. Let's just work down through it. Let me take another drink of water. That's the pollen, man. It's the pollen. I'm blaming it on the pollen. Judges 13, 1 through 20 says this. Now the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord handed them over to the Philistines for 40 years. We just read that a moment ago. And at the time of the judges lasts for about 400 years. So God is going to use the Philistines. So they're under the oppression of the Philistines to bring pain and misery to the Israelites and get their attention. That's the whole point. He wants the Israelites to shift away from these false gods and these cultures that they've enveloped and allowed themselves to be involved in, to shift back to God. And that's what they need to do. Verse 2. And there was a man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was infertile and had not given birth to any children. Okay, so Samuel, who wrote this, about 400 years, I'd have to double check that, a long time after it happened. So he writes this stuff. So you have this family. He's going to expand on who this family is about. Verse 3, Then the angel of the Lord, or God incarnate, appeared to the woman and said to her. Now, the first time he appears to her is without her husband. He's not there. He's going to get into the picture in a few moments. And there was a man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was infertile and had not given birth to any children. Then the angel of the Lord God, who was God incarnate, appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold now, you are infertile and have not given birth, but you will conceive and give birth to a son. God does the same thing with John the Baptist's parents. And the same thing with Jesus' earthly parents, with Mary and Joseph. He visits them as an angel and brings great news to them. Verse 4, And now be careful not to drink. Again, Jesus in his earthly form, in pre-incarnate form, is giving this, we don't know her name, but we know her husband's name, Manoah's wife's some instructions in regards to not only her and how she ought to behave over the next 9 months or so, but also to her son. And now be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. For behold, you will conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, not a Nazarene, a Nazarite, okay, to God from the womb, and he will begin to save Israel from the hands of the Philistines. The boy shall be a Nazarite. It's the same instructions that was given to John the Baptist to his parents prior to his birth, that he will be a Nazarite. Let's talk about the Nazarite vow for a second. Can we do that? God himself has asked Samson's parents to set him aside as a Nazarite. Not a Nazarene, but a Nazarite. Jesus was a Nazarene because he was born in Nazareth. The Nazarite vow is taken by individuals who have voluntarily decided to dedicate themselves to God for any length of time. It might be a month, it could be years, it could be open-ended. All right, these are people who have decided that they're going to do this. So they enter into it voluntarily. God doesn't make them do this. It's something that they feel like they need to do. And Numbers 6:2 says, Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if a man or woman wants to make a special vow, a vow of separation to the Lord as a Nazarite. It could be men or women. Characteristically, we think of it being just men, but that's not what Numbers says. It can be a woman as well. So secondly, both men and women could participate in this vow. Thirdly, so the Nazarite vow usually had both a beginning and an end. Now, with Samson, that was not the case. Not the case at all. Neither was it for John the Baptist. Now, he died, but he never stopped or never left the Nazarite vow. He continued to do that. So it has a characteristic. It would have a beginning and an end. There are also 3 guidelines that were given. It says that that person who takes that vow, the Nazarite vow, would abstain from wine or any fermented drink. Couldn't drink grape juice, or eat grapes or raisins, not even the seeds or the skins. Okay, so if you like that kind of stuff, you're gonna have to give that up if you're going to be a Nazarite. All right. Next, the Nazarite was not to cut his hair for the length of the vow. Symbolic. People would see this person walking down the street. He got really long hair. Obviously, times have changed, but in those days, okay, that's what they did. Also, it was not to go near a dead body because that would make him ceremonially unclean. So there's certain things that they had to do and stay away from in regards to fulfill that vow of being a Nazarite. Now, although the Nazarite vow is an Old Testament concept, there is a New Testament parallel to the Nazarite vow. It's found in Romans 12, 1 and 2. I'm going to read that to you. Romans 12, 1 and 2. The Apostle Paul states this. He says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." So you don't have to take the Nazirite vow, and some of you might be saying, "Hey, maybe I need to do that." No, you just need to apply Romans 12, 1 and 2 to your life. That's what you need to do. That's what we all need to do. All right? That's what we need to do. So that's the Nazirite vow. And Samson has, well, his parents took it for him, but nevertheless he grew up in it. Let's continue on verse 7. "But he said to me, Behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and now you shall not drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing, for the boy shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death." Then Manoah pleaded with the Lord and said, "Lord, please let the man of God whom you have sent come to us again, so that he may teach us what we are to do for the boy who is born." Before I get on to verse 9. So God appears in physical form to Manoah's wife and says, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a son. Even though you have not had any children, you could not get pregnant, you will now. He is to take the Nazirite vow and he's to serve God all of his life. Well, she goes and tells her husband about this person who visited her. In verse 9, "And God listened to the voice of Manoah." So Manoah prays and asks God to visit him as well. "And God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman as she was sitting in the field, but Manoah, her husband, was not with her." Samuel gets into some detail here. Verse 10, "So the woman hurried and ran and told her husband, Behold, the man who came the other day has appeared to me." God answers Manoah's prayer. Verse 11, "So Manoah got up and followed his wife, and when he came to the man, he said to him, Are you the man who spoke to the woman? And he said, I am." So the three of them are standing there. So you have Jesus, who is God incarnate at this point in time, not an apparition, not a vapor, not some hologram. It was him, okay? And then Manoah and his wife. And they ask him, "Are you the one that visited my wife the other day?" "Yes," he says, "I am." Then Manoah said, verse 12, "Now when your words are fulfilled, what shall be the boy's way of life and his vocation?" Those are interesting questions that Manoah is concerned about standing in front of God. I don't think, I'm just speaking personally, okay, those aren't questions that I would ask. I just wouldn't, and I have to think about it a little bit more, but I'm not going to ask him, well, what kind of jobs are you going to have down the road? What's the plan for this kid's lives? They need to go to school, or is he going to be poor like the rest of us? Again, those are not questions I would ask, but it wasn't me, it was Manoah, verse 13. "And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, The woman shall pay attention to all that I said." What the angel of the Lord, or what God incarnate is saying is, I told your wife, now go talk to her! Exclamation point. Okay? I want to repeat all this. Verse 14, "She shall not," talking about his wife now, "she shall not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. She shall keep all that I commanded." Isn't that right, Manoah's wife? She would shake her head and she would affirm that. Yeah, that's what you told me. Verse 15, "Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, Please let us detain you so that we may prepare a young goat for you." Hey, I'd like you to hang out here for a while. Let's go have lunch together. All right? I'd have done the same thing. Jump in the car. Let's go get a hamburger or something. There's some other questions I'd really like to talk to you about. It was a custom that was common to that day. In fact, if you remember back in the book of Genesis with Abraham, when Jesus and two angels appeared to Abraham when he's sitting under the oaks of Mamre, probably in the heat of the day, and these three people spend time with him. He said, I got to fix a lunch for you guys. Verse 16, "But the angel of the Lord said to Manoah," notice the word Lord there. In fact, every time you're going to see it throughout this narrative, it's spelled with all uppercase letters. L-O-R-D, all uppercase. I'm going to explain that in a second. "But the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, Though you detain me, I will not eat your food." I'm not going to eat it. So you want to cook it, that's fine. But if you prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord. So you can do that. But I'm not going to hang out with you and eat this goat. That's not what I'm doing, not what I'm about. For Manoah did not know that he was the angel of the Lord. All right, whatever. Nevertheless, It's all uppercase letters. L-O-R-D are all uppercase letters. And it's the Hebrew word for God or Yahweh. So that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Verse 17, and Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, what is your name, so that when your words are fulfilled, we may honor you? I think he's still not figured out who this person is standing in front of him. Verse 18, but the angel of the Lord said to him, why do you ask my name, comma, for it is wonderful. When I was putting this together and I was reading down through the narrative, I ran across this verse in verse 18. But the angel of the Lord said to him, why do you ask my name, for it is wonderful? What does that mean? So I went through my commentaries, didn't get much. I went through lexicons and all that kind of stuff. Nope, didn't get much. So I went to a couple of other translations, and it helps, I think, a little bit to understand, for it is wonderful, in regards to his name. So usually I study out of the New American Standard Bible, and I'm going to reference the New Living Translation as well as the King James Version as far as the last part of that verse is concerned, because that intrigues me. Manoah is asking about his name. Why do you ask my name? For it is wonderful. The New Living Translation, the same verse, says this, why do you ask my name? The angel of the Lord replied, it is too wonderful for you to understand. Interesting. King James Version says, it is a secret. God is still and continues to be filled with mystery. Even though we as a scientific society, and science has gotten in the way in a whole bunch of areas over the past couple of years, but it has been easy for us, even as Christians, that if you can't, somehow find evidence for it in the Word, and I think those are important things that we do and should be involved in. But sometimes if they're just questions that we cannot answer, we kind of make up a response. And I got to tell you this right now, I can't make up a response. God is a mystery. And there is that aspect about him. He has not told us or given us a record about every aspect of who he is. That's just not how he operates. We know that. But he is a mystery. And I think there are certain things that are still mysterious in this world that we can't answer. We would like to be able to answer, but all those questions will be answered once we get to heaven. So when the King James Version says it is a secret, he's basically saying, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. It's amazing, isn't it? Verse 19, then Manoah took the young goat along with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, and he performed wonders. This person, this God incarnate performed wonders, and I wanted to see what that meant. But he performed wonders while Manoah and his wife looked on. The Amplified Version translation uses the phrase, he performed miracles. I wish that Samuel, as he wrote this, would have helped us. Well, what do you mean? What did he do? Is he pulling a rabbit out of a hat? Obviously, it's not those sorts of things. Making people disappear? I don't know. No. But he's doing something. Again, it comes back to the mysterious, and God has decided not to give us all the answers. So let's bump down to verse 20. For it came about when the flame went up from the altar toward heaven, that the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. How does he do that? When Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground. And probably at that point in time, there was a bell that went off in their brain saying, this is a pretty big deal. Pretty big deal. But as you go back throughout the Old Testament, God oftentimes represents himself in different ways. He appears, first of all, to Moses as a burning bush. And God does what he does. And then God appeared to Moses as he's leading them into the wilderness, that God is a flame. He is a fire. And so the people will follow that fire, that pillar of fire at night so they could see it. And then during the day, he is a cloud to Moses. So God, when we start putting God in a box and start saying, well, God could only operate this way. And I think there are certain ways that is true in regards to our salvation, that sort of thing. But there are so many other things that just aren't answered in regards to our relationship with God. And that's okay. And that's okay. So let me do this. I'm going to stop there with Samson for a moment, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty over the next couple of weeks. But Samson was this guy that had everything going for him. And we're not sure, you're going to see this next week, I think that there's about a 20-year or so period between his birth and then his relationship with various women. And so for those first 20 years, his parents are probably pouring into him godly things and explaining to him how God has watched over them, the stories about the Exodus, the Ark of the Covenant, even the Ark, all those kinds of things. And they're sitting down with him, and we don't know if he had any other brothers and sisters. I'm assuming he didn't. It's not listed. And so his parents have spent a lot of time with him. And as soon as he can, he leaves the house. And he goes and starts getting into trouble. And lots of trouble, and not just little stuff. It's big trouble. And I don't know, maybe you have a family member or members who have left the faith. That might be the case. You know, they are your Samsons. And perhaps they're doing things or involved in activities that are contrary to God and His Word. You raised them in the faith. You raised them in church. They saw you on a regular basis praying to God, going to church, and yet still they want nothing to do with God. Or maybe even communication has been severed between you and them. You might get a card every once in a while or a text every once in a while. But other than that, there's no communication. And they want nothing to do with you or God. And it breaks your heart. I have some friends and family members that have done just that. And they were raised in the faith, and their children have left the Lord. And you can't, it'd be nice if you put your finger on one or more things that caused it. But we got to go back to Cain. And Cain knew God personally. Cain's parents were created by God, but yet Cain still decided, nope, I'm gonna leave all this. I'm gonna go out to the land of Nod. I'm gonna put all this in my rearview mirror, shake the dust off of my feet, and say, God, see you later. And that's exactly what Cain did. And again, you might have children or grandchildren who are in that same kind of a situation. I don't know that. I don't know that. So the answer is, I think, here's the answer that I have for you, and that is to continue to come before God and seek His wisdom. What does God have? How can God direct you in regards to those who are perhaps family members or loved ones, but they've left the faith? What do you do about that? James 1:5, in regards to this business of wisdom, James 1:5 says this of the New Living Translation: if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and He will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. But you have to ask regularly in regards to those loved ones perhaps who have left the faith. I think it is important too that you maintain a godly lifestyle, because they'll continue to watch you. That you maintain a godly lifestyle, and that what you grew up in, if you grew up in the faith and you grew up in the church, that it has impacted you in a positive, godly way, and they'll need to see that. Don't stray from the faith yourself. And then lastly, you do it as biblical and godly in your home. In your home. That's your home. All right? It's not your kid's home. It's your home. One of the things that I just don't quite get, and maybe that's a generational issue for me, and I know people who they will have their unsaved family members over to their house, Christmas, that sort of thing. And when it comes time to go to church, they don't invite their kids or family members to church. In fact, the people don't even go to church because they want to stay with their family. I don't think that's a good thing to do. Not at all. I think what you need to do is invite your family members to come to church with you and be relatively emphatic about it. They're going to come over and they're going to eat your food. They're going to use your utilities, etc., and you want them there. You don't want to alienate them. I get it. But there are times when you take a stand and say, no, this is what we do, and I would really like you to do this. I'd really like you to do it. Will God honor your prayers and godly lifestyle? He may. He may. Perhaps He's doing things in the life of your Samson, those ones who have drifted away, that you're not even aware of. He might be working in their hearts and their lives, and you don't see it when they're away from you. But continue to pray for them, ask God for wisdom. You continue to promote your godly lifestyle in their presence, right? Be merciful, be gentle, be loving. And you do, when they come to your house, you do what is godly in your house. You ask blessings over the meals. Please don't be embarrassed about that. Well, Pastor Wayne, just turn them off. Let them be turned off. It's more important to honor God. No? I think so. Let me pray with you. Father, again, thank you for today. Thank you for your Son, Jesus. Thank you for our faith. I pray that we be bold with our faith, not obnoxious about it, not silly about it, but allow your Spirit to move within us in regards to family members that may have left the faith. It's hard and it tears our heart out, especially for me when I see good friends and their kids are doing things that they ought not to do. So Father, thank you. Continue to watch over us in your Son's name. Amen. This is a hard one, but I think that Samson gives us some good examples in regards to what to do and what not to do. His parents were probably pretty amazing folks, and as they grew up, they saw him doing his craziness and still stayed close to him, but yet did not enter into the craziness that he was doing. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you, and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. God bless you. Have a great week, and we will see you about 7 days from now. Have a great week. Bye-bye.